Hi, I'm Lisa Laronde, the first woman president at RSG International and the host of this new podcast called the Powerhouse Project. On the podcast today, we have Mandy Bujold. Mandy is an 11-time national champion, a 2-time Canadian Olympic boxer, and said one of the most important fights she's ever had to fight was outside of the boxing ring. Welcome to the podcast, Mandy. I have to start with how impressed I was when we chatted yesterday. And I can't wait to see what you do for gender equity, not only in the construction industry, but for every industry that you touch. We're lucky to have you as part of our community. So let's start with what brought you to the construction industry.
Sure. So I run this charity boxing event, and one of the people who came to try out was Jeff McIntyre, who's the president of Grand Valley Construction Association. And at that time, I was trying to figure out, I was just finishing a mat leave, figuring out what's next for me. I knew I wasn't going back to boxing. So I was trying to figure out, okay, where do I go? What's that next career move? And we kind of had a conversation and started talking about what was happening in the construction world. And it seemed like a really great fit. And it was, something that I actually didn't anticipate. I never really thought I would go into the construction world, I would say. Even though my family is in construction, it was just never really something that I thought about for myself. So it's been really interesting. So it's definitely been a learning curve, but learning a lot, meeting a lot of really amazing people. And it just seems like such a great community to be a part of.
That's awesome. I didn't know your family was in the industry. What do they do?
So my dad, he worked in construction. He worked as a laborer his whole life. My brothers are both steel workers. My uncles are bricklayers. So I've been around it a lot. I've heard a lot of construction talk over the
Yeah.
years, but it's a little different now. I actually walked on my first construction site, about a month ago, and that was like completely different than like just driving by it and seeing and hearing
Yeah.
about it. Being there yourself is like, oh, okay, this is interesting.
This is real. Yeah.
It's
So
real,
how did
yeah.
you actually get involved in boxing and where did it start?
So my journey in boxing started a little later in life, I would say. When I was younger, I wasn't actually really involved in sport. I was not athletic at all, which is so
So
crazy.
surprising.
No, and my parents, and I think it was this, like my parents would pick the things I was involved in, and it was always things like baton twirling. And I just wasn't good at them. I wasn't flexible and I didn't really enjoy those sport experiences. So really early on in life, I just thought, you know what? I'm just not athletic. And it was to the point where even in high school, when like gym class was no longer mandatory, like I opted out. I was like, okay, I don't want to sweat. um, so it wasn't until a little bit later on in life, my brother, he joined a boxing club in KW called the Waterloo Regional Boxing Academy. And I just remember him coming home. He was really excited about what he was learning. He was getting in shape. He was learning something really cool. And I remember thinking like, oh, that looks really cool. Like I want to do what he's doing. Um, but believe it or not, it was not cool to bring your little sister to the boxing club.
I'm shocked.
Just especially back then. So I kind of waited, and then he finally quit, started working full time, and then I still had the interest, and I just, I walked in the gym and I just fell in love with it. Honestly, like it was just a completely different environment, but it was challenging. It was something that was really hard. It didn't come easy for me. I had to work at it. I had to, really put the time in, but it was something that I was interested in learning. I wanted to learn how to throw proper punches. I never thought I was going to, compete one day. It was really just about the skill of being able to throw punches. And then it just kind of one thing led to another. And then I started competing and realizing I was good at it. And then that again just kind of spiraled into what became a career for me.
So were there actually other women that you were boxing with at the time? Were you only allowed to box with women or was it a mixed?
So when you're in the gym training and doing a lot of your sparring, usually that's happening. I mean, it can happen with men or women. When you're actually competing, it does have to be against another female. So everything's kind of based on weight class and experience and stuff as well. So when I first started, I will say that there was not a lot of women in the gym. Women were kind of seen as distractions, and there was a lot of coaches actually that they just didn't know how to coach women, or they thought we needed something different when it came to coaching. And I remember a couple times where, mid round, I was in the ring finally getting comfortable with things. And like a coach would just come and just completely kicked me out. And just wouldn't talk to me. And I know that the only reason he did this was because I was female. And it was, it was kind of shocking, I guess, at the time, because I felt like I was just kind of doing what I had to do. I just put my head down and I would work. And then a few years later, the same coach came up and apologized and said, "Hey, like, you know what? I'm sorry that I did that. I know I did that." And he just basically said, "I just didn't know how to coach females." And I just felt uncomfortable. So that was my reaction. I just kicked you out. Probably not the right reaction, but nonetheless, right? Like, I accepted his apology because
Yeah.
I thought, well, yeah, you know what? It was
Yep.
a different time, right? There wasn't a lot of girls around. Like, I do remember, for me specifically, there was one girl in the gym, and I remember she was a police officer and she was training, and I remember watching her, and she was pretty badass, and she was honestly like beating up the guys in training, and I remember thinking like, I want to be that girl. um, so I definitely had someone that I saw, and that kind of motivated me to
Yeah.
like, okay, this is possible. This is something that I could really do. But yeah, there was definitely times where you'd look around and you were the only girl, and I was okay with that. It didn't really bother me. And then I got to be part of that group of women that pushed things forward, right? To try to
Yeah.
get more women interested. I remember going into high schools. I went into hundreds and hundreds of high schools talking about boxing, and actually doing introduction boxing classes, with no contact. And you would find, one or two girls that were like, "Hey, you know what? You should try boxing. Like, you have natural ability." And we'd kind of bring them in, and you kind of start at the grassroots levels. It was really amazing to see. Even now, you walk into a boxing gym, it's probably 50-50. Like, there are
Oh,
tons of
that's
women
awesome.
taking it up. Yeah, it's really amazing to see.
Now, I think you were telling me yesterday. I don't know if I recall it correctly, but you were saying that there was a time that women weren't actually allowed in the practice boxing rings.
Yeah, so there were definitely times when, women weren't allowed to be in the gym. Obviously that changed. That we weren't actually allowed to compete internationally. I want to say it was like 2001 was the first time for women
You're
to compete
kidding.
internationally. Yeah. That was our first world championships. And then 2012 was actually the first time that women were in the Olympic Games. So it took a
Wow.
lot of pushing, and a lot of just advocating for that, and just having the right group of women kind of talking about it and saying, "Hey, we want this opportunity. This is the pinnacle of every athlete's career. Why are we not getting that opportunity?" And then finally, it started out with a small pool of 12 girls in three divisions, and now at this next Olympics in 2024, we're going to have 124 women represented,
Oh, wow.
across six weight classes. So it's pretty amazing, just even in that short period of time, to see how much it's progressed.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's crazy. So, how did you start your Olympic journey? When did you decide that this was actually going to be something that you wanted to either compete in, or that you had the goal to be able to be an Olympic champion or Olympic Games?
So I guess I would say, like, when I first started competing, I just kind of let things go. I was just focus on the next fight as opportunities came. And then I went to my first Canadian championship, which was pretty exciting. And then to win that gave me an opportunity to then go to an international tournament. So I went to my first, what would be a continental championships, which is kind of like all of the Americas, all the way down to kind of Brazil. And then I ended up winning that event, and that was, to me, the big eye opener, where it was like, wow, like, I didn't realize I was this good, right? Like, I can actually do this, and I can actually kind of get
Yeah.
somewhere with this. And pretty cool to know that I was like not only number one in Canada, but I was number one in this continent. Like, how cool is that?
Awesome.
But then again, women's boxing wasn't in the Olympics at that point. So it was still part of like advocating and kind of getting those opportunities. But and when we first had that chance, it was amazing. I didn't qualify for the first Olympics, because that pool was so small, and the qualification kind of got a little bit messy. For me, I just didn't make it. So I had to focus for another 4 years. And then my first Olympic Games was in 2016. And again, 13 years of work to get there. It was
Yeah.
really just about kind of staying focused on that goal, believing that, hey, I could achieve that. Because I had, there's always going to be naysayers. There's going to be people. I had
Yep.
people in my life where, even in 2012, when I didn't qualify for my first Olympics, I had coaches basically telling me, well, research says if you don't qualify for your first Olympics, you're never going to qualify. And,
Wow.
essentially telling me my career was over, right? Where it's like,
Mhm.
"Well,
Yeah.
no, I don't believe you, and I'm gonna prove you wrong." And I think that's kind of a mentality that I took on really early on, was that there were gonna be obstacles, there were gonna be people, there were gonna be
Yeah.
things that were said, but you had to just kinda, like, find a way through it, and I never let those obstacles become barriers. It was always just really important to, like, find a way around, any of those things that would come up in my career.
Now, so I have two questions. Did you have a support group or people that could advise you or guide you when these obstacles were coming? And I'm just curious, did you get paid through this, or how would you, you know, travel and train and?
Yeah. So in terms of the support system, absolutely. There was obviously, like, I mean, you see the individual when you get into the ring because you're boxing, but obviously, like, having coaching, coach that's in your corner, that's really important. Then there would kind of be a team that would extend from that. I always worked with a mental performance coach throughout my entire career, and that was really, really important for me because there was always, ups and downs. There was times where even if it was just a simple thing, like on a day where you're just having a bad day and you just need like perspective from someone else, it's just so important to have those people in your life. And then of course my family, like my husband, I wouldn't have been able to do it without him, because when I was out training and preparing, like, he was helping, especially when we had our oldest, Kate. Like, he was at home kind of taking on that responsibility, right, of our
Yeah.
daughter. So having that support system is really, really important. There's a lot of stress. There's high stakes, right? Like, you're kind of putting it all in. So that's definitely really key. And then in terms of how do you fund it? So no, you don't get paid. We're not prize fighters at the Olympics. So you're basically doing it because of the love of the sport. Unfortunately, Canada is horrible for this.
Yeah.
So I was really fortunate in the sense that, I built a community. Like, in KW, I was able to kind of go out to the business community, and the people within this community would support me. And I had fundraisers, and a whole bunch of different initiatives to try to kind of make my way there. Speaking at different events, whatever. I got as creative as I could get when it came to how I was going to fund this journey. But I was able to make that happen. So I was pretty fortunate in
Oh,
that.
well, I'm glad you did. So then you had your daughter. So did you qualified for the Olympics and then it was canceled and you had your daughter, or how did that order go?
Yeah, so I actually had so I competed at two Olympics. So in 2016 was the first one I competed at. That one I finished fifth. Whole other story with that one. I ended up in a hospital bed and, like, back
Oh,
into the ring, and it was kind of chaos. So I don't have the best luck, I would say, when it comes to the Olympics. But in 2020, I had my daughter in 2018. 2019 was when all the qualifying would actually happen for the 2020 Olympics, because it kind of gives you an advance. So we started off the process, and then, as everyone knows, early 2020 COVID hits.
yeah,
So I hadn't qualified for the Olympics yet on an international level. Basically, then the Olympics get postponed, which is like the first time in history. Like, we just thought they were going to be
yeah.
canceled and that was it. So then you kind of refocusing for a year, trying to figure out, how am I going to train in my house for the Olympics if this does happen?
Good
So
point.
that was its own challenge. And then, when it did start kind of opening up and things were kind of getting back going, there was a moment in time where the Olympic Committee basically decided that instead of doing a qualifying event for our continent, we were the only people that hadn't actually got into the ring to compete for their spot, that they were just going to pick off this random list that they created. And this list was created based on an 11-month period for women. And so basically, all during the time of either my pregnancy or postpartum period, and they were events that weren't supposed to be selected. Um, because obviously you have to kind of plan those things in this
Right.
situation. But for the men, they were looking at like an 18-month period. And if they would have used the same, there wouldn't have been an issue, right? This wouldn't have even become a case. But unfortunately for us, we kind of thought, okay, maybe they just don't realize what this new rule or this new kind of criteria is, or how it's penalizing someone in my situation. So obviously, initially, it felt kind of personal, like, well, really? Like, out of my whole career, I missed
Yeah.
3 events, and these are the events they're
Yeah.
gonna pick,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I just happened to have a friend who, I didn't know at the time, she was, like, the number 1 litigator in Canada. So I just kinda asked
Nice
her.
friend to have.
Yeah, I kind of asked her for advice. I was like, "What do you think about this situation?" It took her like 3 minutes and a quick
Yeah.
Google search of the Olympic Charter to realize it was a case of discrimination based on sex. And so, you know what? We put it forward and we said, "Hey, this is what's happening. Can you address it?" And essentially, we just were told no, and that basically this was not something that they were going to address. It's important, but not now. And Ms. Bujold can't possibly take this on by herself, was essentially what we were being
Wow.
told.
Don't
But
challenge me.
again,
That's what I get.
yeah, exactly. So in the end, it was amazing to be able to kind of like go through that process. It was obviously very mentally, physically, just exhausting trying to train while preparing for,
Mhm.
a court case and going through that whole thing. But
Plus having a
um,
new family.
having a new family, all of those things, right? All in
Yeah.
one. But it was something that like I had that motivation of like the amount of people that were reaching out that had dealt with this in their workplace, right? Or in different situation, maybe outside of sport and saying like, keep pushing this because this is important. We can't take time off from having a pregnancy, come back to work and then basically be penalized for it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was
Exactly.
something that became a bigger issue, and I think it was really important to fight that. And like we said, it was kind of the biggest fight I had, and the most important fight I had ended up being outside the ring, right? So
Yeah.
it was, yeah, pretty
So
important.
what was the time frame between that when you started this journey and then when you got the ruling that you could actually compete? And I'm assuming you trained through it all that time because you were confident that the ruling was going to go in your favor.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
confident at times. Yeah, I was confident in my team. I will say I was confident in my team. We actually at
Yeah.
some point, Tories, we had 9 women working on this case. It was actually quite incredible. But honestly, like even when we got to the process, it was about a week before, like it was kind of down because the
Wow.
Olympics were at a set date. Everything was kind of expedited to make this happen.
Yeah.
We found out, hey, we won the case, you're going to be qualified. And then even at that point, I didn't see my name on the list. And we were basically being blackmailed, saying, like, sign an NDA that we're not going to talk about this. And then we'll add your name to
Holy
the
shit.
list. And we were like, well,
Holy shit.
yeah. Right? So all of this is happening, and honestly, that was kind of my breaking point, I will say, like,
Yeah.
where I remember sitting there talking to my husband and thinking, like, I was just in tears thinking, like, I don't even want this anymore. Like,
Yeah.
it's not even about the Olympics anymore. Like, it was so frustrating to go through that whole process, and then at the end of it, like, all of the things that were still happening, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, obviously we pushed forward, and I think it was more important just, you know, to kind of continue to move the movement forward, for
Yeah.
women in sport. That obviously I, you know, ended up competing at the Olympics, but I will say that it was mentally draining and something that I didn't obviously have my best performance because of it. So
Definitely. And I can't imagine just, your mental state of, trying to fight for something that, is right. Well, first of all, you shouldn't have to be fighting for in the beginning anyway, but
right.
to go through that whole journey and then not have people support it at the end or to say, let's just keep it quiet. I honestly, I can't imagine. What do you think that this now, because I think it's an important step for us and for young athletes coming up. So what do you think this message sends to them? Do you think it's inspiring or empowering?
Yeah, I think it's something that kind of shows that you don't have to pick between, being a mother or being in
Yeah.
your career, right? In anything, right? Like you can be both. And I think that in sport, for sure, we're seeing a lot more of this and we're actually highlighting a lot more of those stories, which is amazing. We're actually kind of like there's a group now within the Sport Canada umbrella that is, the pregnancy and parental rights committee, right? Where we actually just got a whole bunch of funding to basically fund women to support them. And like, hey, do you need your child to come with you to the Olympics to make sure you can perform at your best? Do you need extra childcare? Do you need, what is it that you need to make sure you can perform at your best? And we're kind of providing those resources. So it's really cool to like be a part of that and see those things now developing.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I know in our industry, I believe it's Kiewit has a new program. It's called the Stork program, and so they have a lot of people that have to, relocate and move to different provinces or even, throughout different countries. And now, as young women or whatever women, they can actually have their breast milk transported back home
Right.
for their children if they're not together. So if you want to continue breastfeeding once you've gone back to work, so I think some of these. movements that we have to make, or some of the conversations that we have to have, really is this beginning to change. And I know that the construction industry certainly needs role models like yourself that are not afraid to take a stand and talk about your journey, and when challenged, stand up for it, because I think that gives a message for this next generation coming up, that um, you know together our voices are loud, and we can make change. So
Absolutely.
what would you like women to take away from, like, your journey, your boxing journey, if you could, if you could have like that happy ending at the end?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I think, one of the biggest lessons that I learned throughout my journey was, it's not about what happens to you that matters, it's about how you react that counts. And for me, that's really important because that's like in life, in anything, right? Like that's one of the biggest lessons, that it's like there's things that can happen. You're going to be pissed off, you're going to be frustrated,
Yeah.
but like, how do you channel your energy? How do you react to that situation? And I think that really shows character, right? That really shows kind of like what you're about and what's important to you as a person. And yeah, I think that's probably I would say one of the bigger things that I've learned. And obviously, like, overcoming obstacles, um everyone's going to have them. It's life, right? We're going to have them. They're going to be
Yeah.
huge to you, right? On the outside might not look so big, but it's like trying to put that into perspective and realize that, hey, it's not a wall, it's not a barrier, it's not stopping you from doing that. It's a bump in the road, right? And trying to make sure you see it that way. I think that's definitely important as well.
And I really like the way your outlook is saying, it's not a barrier, it's an obstacle, and it's something that we can overcome. And I really think it's important that, as women in these roles, is that we talk about, we do need that community. You need that support network. We can't do it on our own, and there's no reason that we should even try to do it on our own. I think, the more people that we can put our hands up and say, we need some help. And I think you're really lucky. So when you had your legal team, did everybody, was it like, did they just do a pro bono, or how did you, like, gather the troops
Thank God.
together?
Thank God. I think I owe like $1 million in billable hours.
Yeah,
Literally.
yeah,
Yeah, so honestly, Sylvie, at Tories, at first she couldn't take on, the case because she represents a lot of really big companies in Canada. And, when we realized that the people that were supposed to be pushing this forward and fighting for us were not doing or saying the right things or taking it as seriously, then that's when she just went to Tories and said, "Hey, can I take this on?" And they completely backed her and gave her the team to be able to do it. So I think it was really nice for me while I was going through the process, was that I knew that, like, it kind of became personal for them too, right? A lot of them were
yeah.
mothers, a lot of them were people who had dealt with similar situations, big or small, and they were fighting for women. And I think that's what was so beautiful about the whole thing, was that, like, the way we were coming together. Honestly, at the very end, when the case was done, we didn't even know the decision. Like, everybody was just in tears. Like, we were just like, we're all just so emotionally drained from, like, everything that went into it. And even just like the things that were said from the other side coming at us. It was very degrading. It was very, yeah, like just so many things that you just wouldn't even imagine happened. But it was, honestly, it was just going through that process and pushing things forward and feeling like, you know what, we did everything that we could do. We put it all out there. We, were 100% prepared. So I had the confidence in that, knowing that, you know what, I can focus on training. They've got this part taken care of. And that really kind of helped me sleep at night, I would say.
No, definitely. Now, did you think you were doing it for, women in sport, or did you realize at the time when you were going through this that this was going to be an impact for women in any industry?
I would say, like, it started out for sure as even like a personal, like, oh my God, like, I want to get to the Olympics. This is my spot. And then, like, really quickly it turned into, oh my God, this is so much bigger than just me, right?
Yeah,
And then it became a global case. I was getting calls from, people in all different countries. Like, I saw my name pop up in articles in Japan and then in Germany. And, like, I was talking to the BBC, and, like, the amount of people interested in this case was just
yeah,
like it really quickly, like, oh my God, the New York Times messaging, it was like, what is happening here? It was because it was so big, right? And it was really just about women moving things forward. And I think, that's what it became. And my like hashtag, line was fight like a mother. And that's what we stuck to. And it was good because people were starting to get behind it. And it was like, you don't have to be in boxing. You can fight like a mother, no matter what career path or wherever you are.
Yeah.
And I think that was pretty cool.
I think that's awesome. I think you've just done so much for, young women that want to have children. I know we struggle with it a little bit in our industry as well, particularly in the
Mhm.
skilled trades, where you see women are delaying having children because they want to get their careers. So hopefully
Yeah.
you can be part of the new movement in the construction industry and help to find some solutions there. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Um, ooh, I would say honestly, like to really just enjoy the process. Like, I think like so often, obviously in sport and life, it's so easy to like you're just so focused on those big goals and those things that you want to achieve that like sometimes
Yeah.
like life just happens so quickly, right? When you have kids, you realize that too, where it's just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
how'd they grow up so fast, right? It's like everybody comments on this. So I think just really trying to like enjoy that process and like just every moment, right? Like the small things, celebrating those small wins is also really important, right? Like, what did I do today? What was really, really great today? It could be something so small and so simple, but I think that those things are really important to celebrate kind of along the way.
That's awesome. Do you still box?
Yeah, yeah, I still do. It's still my favorite way to work out. So I still do some of that, and then I have a couple girls that are actually trying to qualify for this Olympics, and they were my training partners and sparring partners. So I still kind of go in and help them out, give them some technical, advice, but also kind of play a bit more of a mentorship role for them.
That's awesome because I do think that part of giving back would be would be awesome. I do feel like part of that journey is your mental strength and that comes hand in hand with your physical strength. But you really need, I think, that support network to help you through all of that. Now, would
Yeah.
you what's like the age that you boxing career would be like? What would be the end of the career?
I think it's different for everyone. So you can represent your country until you're 40.
Okay.
Um, that I don't know what that number, where it came from or how, but that's kind of like the cutoff to go to like an Olympic Games or like an international event to represent your country. Other than that, you can box as long as you want, actually. Like even within Canada, if you just want to have a fun box, like my corporate event that I'm running right now,
Yeah.
I have a couple people that are actually close to 60 that are stepping into the ring and doing this for the first time. So it's honestly, there's not really an age limit, and there's always kind of a fun way to get involved in the sport, which is cool.
So I just wanted to give you a little opportunity. So it's a charity that you founded. So did you want to just speak about why you founded it? What's the purpose, and what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah, so Champions for Charity is again a corporate fundraiser. It's a black tie Vegas style fight night, essentially. So we do a tryout. We get people from the business community who know nothing about boxing. We do a tryout. We match them up based on like age, weight, and just like athletic ability. We train them. So they basically train for 15 weeks like a professional athlete. So we do everything from their boxing, strength and conditioning. We talk to them about nutrition, mental performance, etc. And then they basically box in this black tie Vegas style fight night. So we support McMaster Children's Hospital with
Okay.
this. And so this is our second year, and we've already raised 265,000. So we're hoping to
Wow.
get to 300 at this event, and it's a yearly thing that we do, and it's yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I think seeing people go through that process is really interesting. Seeing how they kind of take it into their work world as well is really interesting. They learn a lot about yourself when you're stepping into a boxing ring. And it's funny. So Jeff from the Grand Valley Construction Association, he's going through this process and he's competing. So every day at work, we're kind of like talking, work stuff, and then we talk strategy about boxing. So it's really interesting. And he's relating a lot of it back to, the construction world and how things happen. And, even on kind of the health and safety side, like the one thing that he asked me, early on was like, which punch hurts the most? Does it hurt more to get hit to the head or the body? And I'm like, well, the body for sure hurts more, but it's really the punch that you don't see coming that's going to hurt the most. And I mean, in the construction world, right? Accidents happen quickly and things happen quickly. And it's like that thing you don't see coming and don't expect that can cause the most damage, right? And it's very similar in the boxing world. So it's fun to see kind of different people's analogies to kind of what they're learning in the ring and how they can apply it in other aspects of their life.
Oh man, that's awesome. Mandy, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us on the Powerhouse Project. It's clear that your fight wasn't about getting an Olympic medal. I saw that today and when I talked to you yesterday. It was really about gender equity in sport, and I hope that you continue to do that for our industry. You're an inspiration, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Keep up all the great work. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're awesome. I love you.
Thanks.
Find more information about our guests and more at thepowerhouse-project.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.